Morning. So my name's Dave West. I'm the product owner and CEO at Scrum.org. So imagine being the product owner when your stakeholder is Ken Schwaber. You can just imagine what my life's like. I actually know better than you. No, I'm the product owner. So as you can tell from my accent, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I like to think this is the original Boston accent. Obviously, the 4th of July, we just went past that, where a lot of people insult the English. So I like to obviously stammer my Union Jack during the 4th of July. There's some contact information. If you need to talk to me, feel free to reach out to me. But coming from Boston, Massachusetts, but being British, I may use some English that my grandmother describes as mid-Atlantic, so feel free to stop me. I know English might not be your first language. Feel free to stop me and say, Dave, what the heck are you talking about? And sometimes I might not know, actually, but we'll see. There's a nice picture of me. I'm the product owner at Scrum.org. Prior to joining Scrum.org, I joined Scrum.org in October last year. I've known Ken for about 12 years. Interestingly, the person that taught me Scrum, much to Ken's annoyance, was Jeff Sutherland. So Ken's continually, whenever I get something that he perceives to be wrong, he says, well, that's because you were taught by Jeff, not me. So I've known Ken for a long time. Prior to, though, joining Scrum.org, I ran the engineering part of a startup. We grew from about 12 people to over 100. We went for the whole VC thing. So I have a little bit of experience growing Scrum teams, a little bit of experience actually doing Scrum in a sort of startup culture. Prior to that, I was an analyst at Forrester Research, where I ran the app dev practice. So I did a lot of research on Agile. So hopefully I'll be able to share some of these insights with you as we talk about Scrum, talk about 21 years of Scrum. Actually, the anniversary for Scrum is on October. And October the 18th and 19th was the UPSLA conference in Austin, Texas, where the paper that described Scrum was actually posted. If you look at UPSLA Scrum, you'll be able to find that original PDF of the paper, and it's interesting. Not everything is the same, but there's a lot of things that are still the same, which shows you how fantastic Scrum is, that it stands the test of time, which is pretty incredible. So what am I going to be talking about today? Well, first I'm going to just talk a little bit about where we're at today, where Scrum is. We're going to celebrate, because I think it is a celebration. 21 is very important to the United States. It's the year you can drink. Obviously, you can buy a gun at 16, but you can't drink until you're 21. It's probably good that you separate those two ages, hey? But so 21 is a huge celebration in the USA, and we're going to have a chance to celebrate. And maybe this evening we'll be able to toast Scrum and have a few drinks. I mean, I know most of the Dutch don't like to drink, but let's see if we can change that habit just the once. Then we're going to talk about some innovations, some recent innovations. Obviously, you were all on the, some of you were on the Scrum Guide webinar yesterday, where we introduced the 5 values, and where values are back in the Scrum Guide, which is really exciting. Talk a little bit about that, but there's been some other recent innovations that I'll share with you. And then we'll talk about the future. We'll talk about some of the things that are on our radar, some of the things we're starting to think about, some of the things that Ken really gets excited about. So hopefully we'll do that and try to keep you entertained as we go through these slides. So I don't know if anybody knows where Scrum.org comes from, the genesis of Scrum.org. It's an interesting story, because it's funny how it all began many years ago with the new product game. Has anybody read the new product game? Yes, some of you. I recommend it. It's a really interesting, it's a HBR article or piece based these 3 Japanese gentlemen write about really what innovation was. And this was in the 80s. They were looking at 3M, they were looking at Honda, and they were very interested in what the culture was, what the characteristics of a good, innovative company are. And they identified a number of real key characteristics. That HBR article was read by Jeff and Ken, and then they started experimenting. Interestingly, Burlington, Mass., which is where our office is in the same building that they started experimenting with these ideas. Amusingly, when I asked Ken, did you tell the people you were working with that they were doing this new way of working? He said, oh, no, I pretended it was waterfall. Because the last thing that we want to tell the managers, we were doing something different. So they experimented with all these ideas. They then were invited to Snowbird, to Utah, with a bunch of other gentlemen who you may know, these original signatories of the Agile Manifesto. After that, though, what was interesting is there was loads of phone calls. Jeff and Ken were getting all these phone calls, so Ken created an organization called the Agile Alliance to basically deal with all the phone calls he was getting. The Agile Alliance, they built it in a model that didn't allow innovation to be created, particularly around Scrum, which was the passion of Ken in particular. So Ken then formed the Scrum Alliance. Now, he built the Scrum Alliance to fix all the problems with the Agile Alliance. Unfortunately, it created a different kind of set of problems, and they wanted to concentrate on the world of work, broader project management ideas. So he left the Agile Alliance and formed Scrum.org in 2009. When Scrum.org is very simple, we have a very simple mission: to improve the profession of software development. It's not Scrum, interestingly. Scrum is a tool that we use, a lightweight framework that helps us work in an empirical way. It helps us understand, it helps us experiment, it helps us actually work as a team or teams of teams with Nexus. But ultimately, it's for this reason, because software is the most important commodity. Ken believes, and our organization believes, the most important commodity of the 21st century. It's the thing that changes the world every day. Self-driving cars. Hope you noticed Tesla had its first self-driving car accident the other day. A bit embarrassing. Drove straight into a truck and carried on accelerating. So if you're going to do it good. You can imagine that piece of code. Some developer was like, if C large truck, accelerate. He'd had a pretty bad day, I think. But whether it's self-driving cars or pacemakers, whether it's cancer research, whether it's putting a man on Mars, or woman, hopefully, because I wouldn't trust men up there, whether it's building satellites, whether it's creating the next generation of entertainment, software is the commodity that allows us to do that. People talk about being in the big data time, but ultimately, data without software is just a bunch of ones and noughts. Software is the most important commodity of our 21st century, and if we can improve the profession of software development, if we can really improve the way we do software, if we can stop lying to our customers or ourselves, we can ultimately build more software and create wealth in the world. That's what Ken believes. That's what we all believe at Scrum.org. That's why I get up every day. That's probably why you get up every day. And that's our mission. And we're the home of Scrum. Scrum.org is the home of Scrum. I won't go through all these detailed things. A lot of the PSTs are in this room. When I say we're the home of Scrum, you are Holland. The Netherlands is definitely the country of Scrum. You guys are incredibly vibrant. You're probably one of the most vibrant communities around Scrum. A lot of the innovations around Scrum are coming from some of the work that you're doing today. And the professional Scrum trainers, you have the most. The Netherlands has the most PSTs in the world, which is really, really cool. I do want to point out one piece of data. This is a month old now, but last month we went over 1 million assessments taken. Now, is that 1 million people taking assessments, or is it one person taking it 1 million times? Hopefully, it's not that one person, but it'd be good if you got it right, wouldn't it? But it's a significant number. Significant number. So, and that's the kind of level of connection that we're having with the community. But let's talk about Scrum. Let's talk about the situation with Scrum. So 21 years old in October. 21 years old in October. A recent survey found that 90% of organizations that were doing Agile were doing Scrum. 90%. And the other 10%, I have no idea what they were up to. There's over 100 books. I got bored. I did a Google search with Scrum. Over 100 books with Scrum in the title. It's a pretty big number of books. There's over 500,000 people been trained on Scrum. Probably just in the Netherlands, actually. And Scrum's available for everybody. The Scrum Guide is freely available. Jeff and Ken put it on the web, scrumguide.net. And it's available for everybody, free of use. It's not paid for, it is free. We maintain it at scrum.org. We ensure that it's available. We make sure that the translations, I think there's 46 translations into languages I didn't know exist. Obviously, being English, I assume that everybody speaks English, and if they don't, they should, you know. But the 46 translations, incredible. So Scrum has been incredibly successful. So I think it is time to celebrate, all because of you, because of your hard work, because of your pushback against organizations that don't get it. Because of you, Scrum has been successful. Scrum is out there being used every day. Millions of lines of code every day are being created because of Scrum. every day when you have your daily Scrum. Loads of people around the world are having a daily Scrum. I almost want to do a documentary where we film daily Scrums all around the world as the clock goes hour by hour, because that's what Scrum's being used. That's how Scrum's being used every day because of you. So I think it is time to celebrate. I think it's time to crack open the champagne and smile and laugh. Or is it? So this is the Standish Chaos Report. People probably are familiar with Jim Johnson's work. Fantastic database of data. It's kind of worrying data, though, isn't it? It basically says that software development projects are only successful 36% of the time. Now, that's better odds than if you're gambling on the lotto or anything. It's better or going to Las Vegas, but it's still pretty bad. So that means 36% of projects succeed, but the rest don't in some way, shape, or form. Because of Scrum, Jim Johnson's changed what challenged means, and he's changed the definition of that recently. But 45%, almost half, are challenged in some way. Whether that means that they spend a lot more money than they thought, whether that means that quality isn't as good, whether that means that ultimately that the customer is dissatisfied in some characteristic. And then 19% failed. Now you can see these numbers haven't changed that much over the years, which is kind of worrying, because the last 21 years, we've been doing Scrum, and it's been growing in popularity, but it doesn't seem to have affected these numbers particularly. And then there's the whole Agile idea. So when Ken and Jeff invented Scrum, they very much believed, and Ken is really disappointed by this, if you create these teams, these self-organized teams, give them this scientific method, this empirical approach to building software, if you embed them in an organization, they'll be like a virus. They will change the entire culture of the organization. It's basically like bird flu, but for software. It's sort of everybody suddenly starts understanding it. Everybody starts doing it. Everybody starts thinking about it. Everybody starts dropping these command and control, these traditional approaches, this waterfall mindset, and moves into an agile way of thinking. Unfortunately, though, it would appear... Oh, did I press a button then? Or, it would appear that this is not working. It would appear that... that isn't the case. Okay. Don't know what happened there. It would have we got gents? Oops. Anyway, it would appear that isn't the case. It would appear that this is actually the reality, that absolutely nothing. You okay? You see, that's the trouble with computers. I never really trust them. They always do something very peculiar, don't they? They're like, I was going to say a bit like my wife, really. You just as you think it's going really well, she says, Dave, what's that heck's going on? Yeah. So, anyway, this wouldn't have happened. Waterfall, this would have worked, by the way. We'd have done a lot of planning up front. We'd have actually delivered it. It would be fine. Oh, we're back. What? Do you know what happened? Nope. Now, that is just a classic response. So the system's gone down, Mr. Scotty. Yeah, now it's back up. What happened? No idea. But we wouldn't obviously say that, would we? We'd say, well, we think it's probably something to do with the gateway and the interface between the TCP/IP router, and there's probably some DNN issue at the time. When really what we mean is we've got no idea what happened then, but it's working now. So let's stick with that and let's make sure. Anyway, so this idea that Scrum, from a team point of view, would slowly spread throughout the organization doesn't seem to be the case. This is the version 1 survey, which is a really quite a good survey, actually, quite a good sample size. And ultimately, what they've highlighted is that agility isn't spreading across the organization, isn't becoming successful because of the culture of those organizations. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. The culture of organizations is getting in the way. And the reality of Scrum is this in most organizations. This is based on some data when I was at Forrester and that I did. So I was doing a presentation much like this, but the people were in suits. And I was a Forrester analyst. And I put some data on. This was a few years ago. And I basically said, Agile is being used in about a third of projects. And this guy sitting at the front, he said to me, he was a bit pedantic, you could tell from the moment, the sort of guy that had that sort of, one of those pocket protectors. And he sat at the front and he said to me, Dave, why, I don't believe you. I was like, okay, well, we had statistically significant sample size. We did a lot of analysis on it, and we found about a third of projects. He goes, but did you just ask them? I said, yes. He goes, I bet they weren't really doing Agile. They just think they are. I was like, you're probably a tester, aren't you? I can always tell those types. The sort of guy you wouldn't invite to a party, but crucial for a software development project. And he said, I bet they're not doing Agile. I said, okay, so we did a detailed analysis. We interviewed people. We did actual real data research, and we found that a lot of people said they were doing Scrum. But obviously, we only plan once a year. It'd be ridiculous to plan more frequently. It's a lot of effort. Okay, so you're doing Scrum. And yeah. But we don't release software very frequently. Once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year if we have to. Why? Because the customers don't want it. They don't like the releasing of software. It's awfully hard work on them. But we're doing Scrum. Actually, you're not. You're doing water, Scrum, fall. What we see in most organizations is that Scrum lives in this little oasis of empirical process in a world of command and control. It lives in this little island, a bit like England in Europe, really. But unfortunately, unlike England, it doesn't get a referendum and the ability to leave. Or maybe it does. And we'll talk about that later with some idea called Scrum Studio. Maybe we're going to build a separation. Maybe we're going to do a referendum, change the passports of everybody in the Scrum team, and suddenly we're going to be super, super successful. And unlike the Brexit, I think Scrum can be successful in an island. So water, Scrum, fall is the reality in most organizations. Ken describes Agile, Enterprise Agile, as disappointing. He describes 3 kind of adoption modes. The one I described, where Scrum starts small and then grows, this subsume kind of model. He sees this SAFe kind of approach, Scaled Agile Framework approach, where you take basically a new way of building software, well, call it a new way of building software, and paste it over your existing organization, and suddenly it's Agile, in spite of the fact that actually you've just relabeled all the existing processes that you had. The PMO now use epics instead of plans, but ultimately it's exactly the same. The third way is this incremental approach. And he sees all of these as not particularly successful. He believes that there's been significant failures. That doesn't mean they're all unsuccessful, but ultimately these things are very hard because you can't change the culture of an organization. It's very difficult. We also see that Scrum has become a little bit like snake oil. It's become this sort of like mystical path that people can follow, and that you get these consultants, sort of like these almost religious people that walk around the world spreading ideas around Scrum that are actually not true. If you get 5 consultants in a room, you get 6 different implementations and ideas around Scrum. This inconsistency is starting to get in the way of success because people are arguing about what's in the backlog. They're arguing about what a daily Scrum is. Maybe they call it a daily stand-up even. Perish the thought. They believe that the sprint review is a phase gate to releasing software instead of an opportunity to inspect and adapt at the sprint level. They don't understand that you can deliver continuously through the process. They believe that actually it's okay to have a hardening sprint. Sounds awful, but some organizations believe that. And there's organizations that are driving this throughout the world and breaking the ideas of Scrum. We've fragmented the ideas of Scrum. And increasingly, what we're seeing is that professionalism is actually very important to our industry. Now, that's healthcare.gov, a great example of a project that doesn't get round to doing performance testing until the end. You can see what happened. Instantly, they put the website online, and it fell over because 1 million people logged on. No shit. No surprise. There's 400 million people in the US, and some of them want healthcare. And I know that's not very Donald Trump of me, but yes, people do want healthcare, and they logged on, and they took the site down. And when they asked the project, they went, well, we were having some issues with development, so we didn't do performance testing. We moved that until phase 2. Well, that worked really well. Obviously, in Europe, I don't know about you, but Volkswagen has become synonymous in the US with cheating. Imagine that story that's on your backlog, gets delivered into your team by the product owner. The product owner says, hey, look, you know this emissions test thing. Can you actually cheat? And the software engineers, what do? Yes, sir. How long is it going to take? As long as you want, sir. And we deliver it. And guess what? It cheats. And now Volkswagen are in a lot of trouble because of it. Billions of dollars in fines. Nobody wanted to buy diesel Volkswagens. So professionalism is actually starting to become important to our industry. The ability to push back. Yesterday we talked about the values. If you had the opportunity to see the webcast, download it and look at it online if you can. It's really quite interesting. Jeff and Ken are presenting together, which proves two things. One, they're alive. I'm still a bit, sometimes I do think it's a bit like Weekend at Bernie's, if anybody's ever seen that. There's Jeff and Ken, we carry them around. No, they are still alive. And secondly, they do like each other. Now, yes, there is definitely a bit of Tesla positioning at every time we meet. Both of them own Teslas. Jeff has a bigger battery. So obviously on the drive home last time, Ken instantly got on his phone and tried to order a bigger battery. So, but they're still alive and they get on well. They presented yesterday about the values, and that really talked about professionalism. That talked about the importance of actually courage, for instance, which is a key tenet of professionalism. So, all right, so Scrum, super successful, used everywhere because of people like you, marvelous, excellent, but, oh dear, projects are still not super successful. You know, over half projects fail in some way, shape, or form, or are challenged. We've got issues with professionalism. We've got issues with inconsistency, the snake oil sort of salesman. We've got issues with water scrum full. We've got issues with culture. Okay, so that's the stage. Scrum is being very popular and very successful at the team level. As it grows, it's become hard, and ultimately some of the characteristics of Scrum are being lost along the way in some way, shape, or form. So what are some of the recent improvements that have been aimed at fixing these things? I'm going to share a few. The first one is about measurement. So we all know that Scrum is empirical, right? We all know it's a scientific method. We all know that we build hypotheses or experiments and we deliver them in and we learn by doing. We're continuously verifying. We're continuously understanding what we're doing in an iterative approach using these ideas of sprints. We all get that. But how do we measure success? Well, velocity, that's the only way to measure success, isn't it? That's how I measure success. Whether it's drinking or anything. Yeah, it's sort of like how fast I drink, how quickly I eat, how quick I can go to the bathroom. I don't know.'t I measure success, probably not the last one. Though my son is potty training at the moment, so there might be a few bathroom jokes. I didn't realize how complex and how important that whole process is. But when you have a 3-year-old going through potty training, there's a lot of direct evidence, unfortunately. And the phrase you don't want to hear is, Dada, I've had a poo-poo. Oops. So measurement is very, very important. And how do we understand what's valuable from wasteful? Velocity, defect density, burn down? We would argue that the most important way of measuring success is with direct evidence. Direct evidence. This is an idea called EBM, evidence-based measurement. So we believe that there's 3 main axes of measuring these. We believe the top one, current value, is incredibly important. Current value being, revenue per employee, product cost ratio, employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, those kind of things. So the material sort of value of the product you're delivering. Time to market. Incredibly important, not just in terms of how regularly you deliver, but also how stable that product is that you deliver. So how fast you can get this mean time to resolution kind of stuff out. And then ability to innovate. How much new stuff are we delivering? What's the quality of that new stuff? And what stuff are people using? What kind of stuff are they actually using? These 3 dimensions we bring together in something called the Agility Index. EBM, is the idea. So imagine in your organizations, the products you're building, if you start measuring them in a consistent way, you start measuring them with direct evidence. Are you sure? I've only just started. Sorry, this gentleman just held up 15 minutes. So imagine if we could start measuring them in a direct way. So when I was a Forrester analyst, we did some research that was kind of interesting about high-performance teams. We found many characteristics of high-performance teams, but one was very, very telling. High-performance teams had a very clear idea of value. They understood what they were doing in the context of business value. The guys at Netflix, interestingly, weren't measured by anything around velocity or anything like that. They were measured by how many people were coming to the site, using it, and how often they were coming back. Value, real business value. Start pushing real business value into your team. EBM is a technique, an approach, a practice, or a set of practices that can help you do that. The next one is around scale. So Scrum is really good at the team level. You know, you've got a backlog there, one team's working in this sort of chaotic world, they survive, they manage that, you know, all of the chaos around them, but they continue to be successful. But, and, you know, we've all seen this life cycle, this nice little diagram that sums up the Scrum framework, teams working really, really well. But what happens when you've got 9 teams working together? It starts getting harder and harder to work together. Now, Ken, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, when we were talking about this, said, no, it's easy. The teams can work it out. Just get them together, they'll work it out. It would appear that isn't the case. It would appear that we need to provide a little bit more context to these people, that we need to provide them with some techniques, some practices, dare I say, an exoskeleton to Scrum that allows these teams to work together. Some more ceremonies, maybe some more roles and responsibilities that allow us to do this. So Nexus is a recent innovation to help us deal with this. How many people are familiar with Nexus? Anybody looked at it? Wow, that's why I love coming to Holland. So that and the beer, obviously. What Nexus provides us with is an exoskeleton to Scrum, which allows us to scale these Scrum teams. It puts into place a number of different things. For instance, the Nexus integration team, the NIT, badly named, but Ken is a unique character when it comes to naming. I mean, who would have used Scrum Master, hey? But the Nexus integration team is a set of responsibilities around integration, resolving the dependencies, the problems that the teams are getting around the dependencies to allow us to deliver a fully integrated increment continuously. You'll see some other things there that make sense. So we have this idea of Nexus, which is recent. And what's interesting is that it doesn't matter what scaling model you're using, Scrum seems to be at the heart of it. So Nexus is how to scale product delivery. It's not how to scale Scrum across your organization. It doesn't talk about portfolio management. It doesn't even talk about operations and enterprise architecture. It doesn't talk about systems engineering. It doesn't talk about finance or HR. What it does talk about is how to scale product engineering or product delivery, the ability to deliver software at scale. It does not talk about the other things. And you'll find that Scrum is at the heart of every scaling model and is the most important single thing for scaling. Most organizations are using Scrum in some form. Okay, so recent innovations. EBM, direct evidence. Nexus, doing an exoskeleton to Scrum for scale. Now, the Scrum Guide. So Scrum Guide is continuously being, it was only 42 translations. It's continuously being reviewed and updated. Interestingly, it hasn't been updated that much because we have to keep it the essence of Scrum. The framework has to stay pure of the practices. There's always some tension between Jeff and Ken here. Jeff seems to want to put lots into it, and Ken's always trying to keep it a lot smaller. But there's one set of ideas that had to be added. So yesterday, the webcast with Jeff and Ken talked about these 5 characteristics, of professionalism, these 5 values, how to turn Scrum into a value system: courage, commitment, focus, respect, openness. These ideas, these values, though they overlap, and they do overlap in how you actually implement them, but ultimately, if you can take these values and you can start applying them on a day-to-day basis, you will find that not only does your life become easier, but the value you deliver to the organization you're in will become higher. You'll find that actually being courageous in spite of the organization can actually be great. Being open, even when it's admitting that you don't know everything, is crucial. Committing to the process, committing to the empirical approach to delivering software, even if you don't know ultimately how successful that software is going to be, is good, is great. Having respect for your team, having respect for the roles, trusting your product owner. I say that to Ken all the time. Please trust your product owner. He says, that's only for people that don't understand. Having respect for that self-organization, having respect for the team is crucial. These 5 values are really, really important. If you go to scrum.org, you can download a poster. That's always good. And the reason why it's good to have a poster, not only because it's cool to have posters, but also because every day you can actually look at those values and make sure you're following them. Maybe play a game where you put stickies next to a value to demonstrate how you've demonstrated that particular value every day. I wrote a blog that came out yesterday. Some of you can look at that. It's got some ideas how you can test yourself against these values on a daily basis. Okay, so values are in Scrum Guide, EBM, Nexus. So these are some of the recent innovations that we've brought to the market as we try to make Scrum more successful. We try to help you become more successful in your organizations. So what's next? What other things are Scrum.org and the Scrum community working on next? So what we see is done is still a problem. How many people in this room consider done to be software in production? How many people are actually managing to do that every sprint? Gentleman with the dicky bow, good job. Nice to see it. That's the reason why you get to wear that. Nicely done. But most organizations still aren't doing that. Done, maybe we've got test in it now. Maybe we've even got automated production type performance testing, security. But ultimately, what we're finding is that it still hits operations and waits. What we still continuously do is we use the sprint review as a phase gate to release into production, maybe. And then it goes into this other organization. So we hope that done will start growing. We hope that maybe DevOps is next. And then maybe done is not just done in terms of delivering to production, but it's also instrumenting it with maybe lean analytics, so we're getting data back that proves the hypothesis back into development. Maybe your sprint review isn't reviewing stuff on your machine or on a VM even, it's actually reviewing it in production, seeing what people are doing it, observing what they've done and talking about that data. How exciting would that be? How fantastically empowering would that be? How much would it improve how we deliver software? Pretty massively. So we have an idea to help you. Now, the SDK. Now, it is a play on words. So SDKs, most people have used an SDK, right? It's a software development kit. It's a class library, usually some documentation, maybe some example tests, maybe a build script or two. It helps you build software, right? Well, we believe that you need to extend the SDK to include all the things that you need to effectively deliver done software. It's an artifact that you as an organization can use to help your teams have a baseline for delivering done. It includes all the stuff you need to deliver done. That could be some Jira stuff, it could be some build stuff, it could be some deployment stuff, it could be all sorts of things. It's interesting, at Task Talk, where I was before I joined Scrum.org, we had a mission. If a new engineer joined, they needed to be able to push them in production within a week. Now, we also were very strapped for people. We were a startup. So what we did in Confluence is we built out a complete set of guidelines to allow them to do that. We built some containerization for them to work in. We built some IDE extensions for Gerrit, using Gerrit, etc. We built a Jira script that helped us do some stuff. We built all that stuff, and you went to Confluence, and you worked through that set of materials to deliver in software into production within a week for this new engineer. Didn't have to be a big change, but it was crucial that they could. The SDK is the embodiment of that in an organization. The idea that you actually start having an artifact to represent this. It's an idea. We're still working on it. We delivered our first one-day kind of overview of it, of how to build one, about 3 weeks ago, and we're still continuously refining it. But imagine a world where you have this SDK to allow you to deliver done software every time, at least every sprint. So SDK could maybe help us with done. It could drive in the discipline necessary to allow us to deliver working software at least every sprint. But how are we going to scale Agile into the enterprise? We see that Agile continuously has a challenge around scaling into the enterprise, right? We see that the culture of the enterprise. I was recently at an airline in the Netherlands yesterday. I was there, and it was interesting. We were having this very interesting conversation. One of their key initiatives is agility. But when push comes to shove, do they really want to change? Do they want to get rid of that layer of that amorphous blob of middle management? Do they want to change so that managers are more like coaches? Do they want to lead rather than manage? Do they want to change the way they fund projects? Do they want to change? Well, maybe they do, and we were talking about that yesterday. But a lot of organizations find this very challenging. So there's time for something else. There's time for an organizational hack. There's time to cheat. There's time to leave the European Union, to use that analogy. This is called Scrumzic, no? Yeah, anyway. So exit and Scrum. Scrumzic? Scrumic? I don't know. But I'll work on that. It's time to actually bring out a separate organization. Stop fooling yourself that people can change. They can't. I remember when I was in the dating world, I used to always fool myself, or actually most of the girls that I dated fooled themselves that they could change me. No, I am always going to be me, unfortunately. The older you get, the more set in the ways we get. And so it's time to actually build a separate organization, because ultimately these traditional organizations are built for one very important thing: efficiency, cost reduction, control, governance. They're not built for innovation. They're not built for experimentation. They're not built for continuously changing in response to the environment. They're not built for agility. They're not. That's not the point of them. So why do we expect them to change? What we need to move to is a network structure. We need to move to value-based management. We need to move to rapid delivery of increment functionality where we can observe from our customers. We need to move to experimentation. We need to move to lean startup kind of ways of thinking. We need to basically use good engineering practices consistently. We need to have a culture of apprenticeship, journeyman master. We need to build that into the culture. We need to build an environment that allows people to be professional and reward them for that. We need to create an environment that's based on value, not on activity. All those things are completely different and alien to most organizations. Organizations that were built to a very different rhythm. So, what we want to do is provide an environment that allows you to basically deliver Scrum successfully at scale. It uses EBM, obviously. It ensures everybody's professional. It introduces the idea of an SDK to allow everybody to build to done consistently. It supports Nexus and Scrum as the way of delivering software, and the SDK is at the heart of that. So you can imagine an organization that has an agile culture being built, that's product-oriented, not project-oriented. The idea of a project is an alien concept to Scrum. You actually deliver and then maintain it. These Scrum teams support the software in production as well. They don't hand it off. They just deliver it to customers and then support it. This environment creates all the services necessary, so HR, finance. It also interfaces with the outside world, allowing a consistent way of connecting this organic thing with a traditional organization. Products are onboarded into this organization in a way that allows them to be successful. That means creating the appropriate test environments. It means allowing the test data to come across. It means basically marshalling all your resources to allow software to be continually, incrementally delivered. EBM is the way we value stuff. It's the way we measure success. We actually create these persistent teams, and we create this sort of tribal culture that's so successful in Management 3.0. We use an SDK. Ken likes to call it methodology-driven development. I don't, but this is his slide. So, but we use an SDK to allow us to consistently deliver that baseline of done. We use modern infrastructure, and we use modern practices around infrastructure to effectively deliver software and tools. And we insist that everybody is a professional, and we reward people on their professional contribution. So the idea of Scrum Studio, the idea of a hack, creating a separate organization to be successfand And it's interesting because when we looked at how you scale agility, when we talked to lots of organizations, that's how we discovered Nexus and built Nexus. We were looking at people doing Scrum at scale, and we tried to characterize some of the ideas of that into the exoskeleton to Scrum called Nexus. When we look at the most successful Scrum implementations, we find that they live in a separate, might be called an innovation center, might be called a digital innovation center. That's always a cool way of, getting the management to agree, because we've got to be digital. It might be called an Agile innovation center. There's always innovation in the title. And we found that that was the most successful. That doesn't mean that you can't do Scrum inside your existing organization in Water Scrum full, but you will never realize the benefits of Scrum at scale until you pull it out of that organization, until you exit the union and put it into a separate organizational construct. But this is ballsy. This takes serious oomph. This takes executive sponsorship. This isn't just somebody saying, I want to be agile but don't want to change. It's like, I want to be happy, but I don't want to change. I want to be thinner, but I don't want to diet or exercise. I want to be better looking, but I don't want plastic surgery. That's obviously impossible. Said like an American. The point is you have to build one of these studios. Oh, hang on a minute. That ultimately means that our mission has changed. So our mission at Scrum.org and the mission of Scrum is to improve the profession of software development. Actually, it's not. It's to improve the profession of software delivery. Ultimately, we have to not only develop the software, we need to deliver it to our customers and see it in use. We need to effectively create an environment that not only develops software, but also delivers it and maintains it. We need to create an environment that sustains value to our customers continuously, and then we pivot, we change, we adapt based on the feedback of those customers using our software. We need to improve our ability to do it, and we need to improve our profession. You aren't software developers anymore, you are software delivery people, craftsmen in the art of delivering value to your customers. That's what you do every day. That's how we need to be measured. That's how we need to be successful. That's ultimately what Scrum, Nexus, EBM, SDK, all those ideas are for, to improve the profession of software delivery. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. First, I wanted to celebrate. You guys have done a fantastic job. You guys, gosh, I see, Mid-Atlantic. My grandmother, she would not be happy with me now. You all have done a fantastic job of delivering Scrum into your enterprises in spite of the organizations you're in, honestly. And I applaud you for that. But we're not as successful as we can be. We're not as successful as we want to be. We still have some challenges with Water Scrum 4. We still have some challenges with culture. We still have some challenges with an inconsistency of Scrum. The Scrum Guide is not well read or well practiced. So how do we fix that? Let's think about using Nexus to scale our product delivery. Let's think about using EBM to measure our product delivery. Let's think about using an SDK to consistently structure our idea of done so that we have this minimal capability that we deliver against called an SDK. Let's think about using a studio to create an environment to let Scrum grow. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I think we've got 21 years under our belt, but I think we're just getting started because Scrum and Agile is going to change the world. It already has, but just think as when it starts changing organizations as well, not just software delivery teams. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully, this has been useful. Hopefully, it's provided some context to a lot of the talks you're going to see today. If you're interested in Studio, I'm speaking in the workshop track, workspace track, something we're going to be W track. Come and see me, have a little chat about Studio. It's an idea. I haven't got all the answers. You're going to have to help me answer some of those questions yourself, probably. But come and find me and chat to me about that. I'll be hanging around all day. Have we got time for questions? Is that allowed? Cool. So, any questions, I guess? No. That was awfully boring. I haven't had my coffee yet. Gentleman at the back. Blimmin' heck. That's
So my question is, how many of these Scrum Studios already exist?
So it's interesting. They might not be labeled Scrum Studios, but we see a lot of innovation centers that are using Scrum as their mechanism for delivering innovation, in the hundreds. We see organizations, like Pro-Awareness building studios that to deliver for their customers because, they believe in Scrum, so they have to actually execute it. Avnet does the same. So there's a lot of these. Now, are they consistent? No. And so one of the things that we're trying to do with the ideas of Studio is get some consistent terminology around them, get some consistent models around them, and then start providing a platform to share the ideas. In the same way as Scrum didn't necessarily invent many of the mechanisms that makes Scrum successful, but it provided a consistent framework to talk about them and to develop them. So, because at the moment, there's no real way of describing other than innovation centers or something like that. There's no real way of describing that organizational packaging. There's also no way to unify the ideas of Management 3.0 around HR and budgeting with the ideas of Scrum. So if we package this up in a way, and if we write about it consistently and talk about it consistently, then we can all learn instead of having to all learn each other's terminology. So there's a lot of separate organizations doing Scrum. They're not called Scrum Studios. That's our experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
The lady over there? Hello, I haven't got the... can we throw the thing at her? Gosh, that sounds worrying, doesn't it?
We
well
have
caught.
A lot of problems when we try to implement Scrum in the working company. They have some experience with something else, and then we try to implement Scrum.
Yep.
What are the problems of companies that started from scratch using Scrum?
So the problems with companies that started from scratch, that's an interesting... So you're saying when you try to implement Scrum in an organization that's already built for another way of working, it's very problematic. However, when you look at small organizations that started with Scrum and then just grew, what are some of the challenges that they face? That's a very interesting question. So what we found, and what I found actually at Task Talk, great example, is that the characteristics of a team doing, so we had one Scrum team at the start. We had one Scrum Master, we had one product owner, it was me, and we were building software regularly, delivering it in spite of all of the chaos that a startup is. That's one good thing, we were delivering to a cadence, it was working. Now, and we got $12 million. So the first thing we do after the party, which we did, and the new website, you always have to build a new website whenever you get funding. So we wasted a couple of $1 million. Then after that, we went, oh, let's hire some more engineers. And so one of the things that we did wrong, and I don't know if this is unique to us, was that we tried just to scale the same model. So we didn't use Nexus. We didn't think of Nexus. We didn't think of professional development. We didn't think of any of those things. So in Studio, we're actually trying to be a bit at the head of the game. One, Nexus is a natural part of Studio. Secondly, value, EBM, and measurement is a key part. The other thing, professionalism. So there's a career path for engineers. Because interestingly, as we grew, we broke that original team. We didn't give them career progression. We didn't tell them how to help the other teams. We spread them out, so they were very dysfunctional. So our cadence dropped, and our actual velocity dropped significantly. The value we're delivering dropped significantly. So instead, what we're trying to provide with Studio is a framework, a set of ideas that allow you to be scalable from day one, that have all of those things in place. It's not complete, but that's one thing that we definitely thought about. And then the other challenge that we had was we brought people in from other companies. Google, for instance, because of course you've got to have some Google engineers. And they came with their own bag of tricks. And there was a lot of tension. Not just from a technology point of view, they wanted to obviously use a number of Google frameworks, we were using some other stuff, but also from a cultural sort of work point of view. So the idea of onboarding, the idea that there's a set process, that's the reason why we invented this deliver software in a week model and had mechanisms around that. This idea of onboarding is incredibly important as well. So that was another characteristic that we found was very challenging. And I don't know if we're unique, but that definitely stopped us from scaling and slowed us down as we tried to scale. But there was very different challenges from bringing in Scrum inside an existing culture, as it were. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Any other questions, comments? Gentleman at the back? All I can see is an arm. That's worrying, isn't it? Hopefully there's a body connected. Somebody's brought an arm in. That's very disarming.
Okay. Why do we stick to software delivery? For me as a customer, there's value in more than software only.
Actually, funny you should say that. So why do we stick to software delivery? Why it's more than software delivery. It really is. So, so Ken and I have had very heated conversations. I got heated. He just told me I was wrong. The reason why our mission and the reason why Scrum.org is focused on software delivery is because software is our blood. If you read the first book, the one with the colors on the front, with Mike Beadle, Ken and Mike wrote this book, it's talking about XP and Scrum. Software is crucial, and those ideas of software development are crucial to it. Now, I actually propose that we should talk about product delivery. I don't believe, Scrum.org isn't in the business of marketing. So we're not applying Scrum to marketing or film production or gardening or managing schools or any of those things. That's not our business. It doesn't mean you can't, doesn't mean you shouldn't try, but it doesn't mean what we're interested in. However, we care about delivering products. And when we mean products, we mean all the things necessary to deliver a product to market and to sustain it in that market. So I actually believe that we should be in the mission of product development, not just software delivery. However, the reason why we don't put that in the title, according to Ken, is because then we sort of forget the software stuff. We have to remember those good software engineering practices that are crucial for Scrum to be successful. We have to provide a bridge to a community of software people, whether they call themselves craftsmen now, whether they call themselves XP people, whether they call themselves continuous delivery people. By leaving software delivery in our title, we provide that bridge. That's what he says. But ultimately, I think we care about product delivery. And that's our focus, and will always be our focus, because ultimately the world, that's how we think of the world. That's why we have a product backlog. That's why why Scrum lives. But you're right that it is more than just the software element of that. Cool. Any other questions or comments? We have time for one more? No? Going on. All right, well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Sorry, mate.
No, I was going to ask if there are really no more questions. Well, give Dave a big round of applause for his great presentation.
Thank you. Now, who'd have thought, hey, look, come to Holland and get given beer.
We did that just for you.
It's brilliant. Thank you very much.
It's a local beer, actually. It's from, I think it's from Amsterdam. Yeah. It's from Amsterdam. It's a good beer. I tasted it, don't know where it's from. Right, thank you very much for a great presentation.
Thanks.
Okay.